Welcome to Still Plays Galaxy of Heroes. We're back with a talk video, and this one is light on topics. This is going to be the second iteration of our quarterly speculation video. We first did this back in October, where we just look at the next 3 months and speculate on what we could see based on the Lucasfilm schedule. Then I want to talk a little bit about Iden, Versio, and Scion, Boba, and we'll wrap up as we always do with the free-to-play gearing of my account. When we did this exercise back in October, it was easy to anticipate the release of Scion and Fennec. I also made some speculation tangentially in that world, but we'll be returning to some of those. The larger bet that I made was that CG had an opportunity to make some releases that were not immediately reactive to the Lucasfilm schedule. And that speculation was directionally correct, but incorrect on its ultimate execution. I thought CG had an opening to go back, visit some of the old capital ships, release some tanks for the Radis or the Finalizer that would make those fleets more usable, especially for us players who don't have all those characters at Relics, who didn't go after Galactic Legends there, especially now that the Houndstooth has been pulled away to the Executor. Also thought that CG could force some spending by releasing a new capital ship on an earlier cadence than they have in the past. Instead, we got a surprise with the release of Starkiller and the legacy characters that was directionally right in the sense that CG released content that was not reactive to the Lucasfilm schedule. Did not think that we were ever going to see video game characters again. It was a very happy release. So we're going to go through this exercise again and see what we can speculate on, because if we can make educated guesses on where the ball is going, we can make preparations that can give us an advantage in Grand Arena and allow us to better allocate our gear and resources, especially for us free-to-play players. And this is something that's worked for me in the past. Before the Grievous rework and droid touch-ups, I had been farming those Separatist droids because I felt like they were prime for something happening with them. And before the release of Padme in-game, I was super paranoid that Jedi Knight Anakin was going to be needed for something, so I started farming him. So that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to look at what opportunities we can exploit within the game based on the schedule moving forward. So here's what we know. Iden Versio was just released in-game last week. That means CG might not be completely done with video game characters. Cal Kestis is the biggest one remaining, and arguably most of the other major ones have been hit. I don't think this is very likely. I think it makes more sense for CG to be able to return to this well in the future. Best not to tap it out right now. Both Obi-Wan and Andor both don't have release dates yet, so we can eliminate them from consideration. CG is going to have to tackle them later in the year. Book of Boba Fett remains the obvious focus. However, CG does not always get advanced notice on the specifics of Lucasfilm content. We've seen this before. So with Bad Batch, Rogue One, Solo, CG was able to make releases into Galaxy of Heroes that coincided with the studio releases. But with Mandalorian Season 1 and Season 2, CG did not make in-game releases until several months after. I think with Mandalorian Season 1, it was almost 6 months before we saw Mando and Grief Karga, those characters released in-game. And with Mandalorian Season 2, what we saw holdovers from Mando Season 1 get released during Mando Season 2. Only Dark Trooper was an exclusively Season 2 release, and that was 3 months after the fact. So that's telling me maybe at the end of the quarter we start seeing Book of Boba Fett releases. And the reason I think that is because TV critics did not get advanced screeners for Book of Boba Fett. That's not a guarantee that it means anything, but it is not a good sign that CG had any coordination with Lucasfilm on this one. So what I do think we're going to see this quarter is going to be holdovers from Mando Season 2, Bad Batch, and elements that can be speculated upon based on the teaser at the end of Mando Season 2. We are starting off with Scout Trooper, and all of these characters are going to be characters that could have been speculated on before the release of Episode 1, Book of Boba Fett. So with Scout Trooper, ties into The Mandalorian, both Season 1 and Season 2, a character that everybody's been wanting in the game for a long time, would finally round out the Imperial Remnant squad and might even boost Iden Versio. So there's a good chance that I think we finally see Scout Trooper, but I've been saying that for a while. Tusken Boba was a character we speculated upon last time we did this exercise. We thought it could either be Scion Boba or Tusken Boba. I think now that we just received Scion Boba, I think it's unlikely that we get another Boba Fett variant this soon. But I think it's possible we could see some releases that lead up to his release, because I think it's inevitable we see him in the game for characters that we're going to be talking about pretty soon. Now, the Tuskens are the exact type of character that this whole video is based around. If you don't have these characters farmed, and a lot of veterans don't even have these characters farmed because there's no reason to do it, go after Shaman, go after like, get ahead of the game, anticipate this. We've been needing a full squad just to round out these characters for a while. It would make a lot of sense that we might see a rework or a touch-up right now. One of these characters might get an Omicron. They just made Raider be required at relics for Lord Vader. Being able to give him more of a purpose in the game would be a nice thing, and something that is a trend we have seen with some of the other characters CG has required at higher relics, whereas like Rolo receiving an Omicron or Rose receiving an Omicron, to make those characters slightly more usable within the game. So at a minimum, farm these characters if you don't have them farm. That's one of the ways that you can be prepared. These characters might even be usable in a smaller squad. They could do something like they did with Fennec, where Fennec was designed to work well in an undersized squad. They could do the same thing where maybe the Tuskens become 3v3 viable. And similar to the Tuskens, the other safe bet here is Gamorrean Guard, Guild Store exclusive. I've been talking about Guild Store exclusives for a while. I had a list video a while back where I talked about the characters I thought were likely candidates to be required for something as a prerequisite at some point. Gamorrean Guard, we've seen now in Bad Batch, we've seen in Mandalorian Season 2, and now they are a major player within Book of Boba Fett. They're a character that CG could have safely anticipated in reworking prior to the release of Book of Boba Fett without being surprised. Like, I think there was some speculation that like Pow and Biston in earlier cuts were supposed to have a larger presence in Rogue One, which is why we have characters in game of them. That type of bet wouldn't be erroneous for CG to make about a character like Gamorrean Guard. They could safely work on the characters like these ahead of time without knowing too much about what the content of the season was going to be. So just like with the Tuskens, he's a character if you don't have farmed, and plenty of people haven't farmed him because he's a useless Guild Store exclusive farm right now. So get him done if you don't. You don't necessarily have to gear these characters. I'm going to be gearing them, but I'm in a different position than a lot of the player base because of my play style. Bib Fortuna is another character we speculated on last time, and like with the Gamorrean Guards, he's been showing up a lot lately. In the Bad Batch, Mando Season 2 with that prologue leading up to the Book of Boba Fett, and now his shadow is cast over this new series. So So he's a character who has a huge prominence in his role in the original trilogy, and with what is going on in the game right now, he could slot into the game because of his tangential relationship to Book of Boba Fett. All the characters mentioned so far, CG could anticipate without seeing an episode of Book of Boba Fett. The next two, though, are directly related to episodes of the show, so if you're not completely caught up, feel free to skip ahead. Actually, if you're just watch the first 2 episodes, you're going to be fine. Tusken Warrior immediately boosts the Tusken squad and brings them one step closer to a complete 5v5 squad. Would be a great attacker. She is a complete badass, and you can see how even with like the addition of Gamorrean Guard, you could get one step closer to having a legendary or journey event that could work you up to the release of a Tusken Boba. So the pieces start getting set. If you start seeing CG do touch-ups or reworks, or near the end of this quarter see her get released into the game, that sets the path forward for how we could see a Tusken Boba released into the game. Black Chrysanthemum. Whether or not you are a reader of the comics, you immediately fell in love with this guy as soon as you saw him. He is definitely coming to the game. It is just a question of when, and I'm hoping we start seeing the first batch of these Book of Boba Fett releases at the end of the quarter. I don't think we will see him before March, but March at the earliest, I think, is when we can start seeing some of these characters that are directly related to the episodes. Our final speculation of the quarter, the Profundity. It's time to add a light side capital ship in the game. Anyone who's seen me in Grand Arena accidentally pair the Falcon with the wrong capital ship, it's happened once or twice, I've still won, and that is because the Falcon does the bulk of the work. Akbar does not carry its own weight, and the Profundity would be an opportunity to add a capital ship worthy of the Falcon. It would also tie in nicely to Andor being a rebel, so it would give us a stronger rebel fleet leading up to that show, and we can look at even either a touch-up or additional ships being added to make a strong rebel fleet that could restore some balance to the fleet arena. Because with the Malevolence of the Negotiator, we had 2 ships that offered balance that allowed CG to be hands-off for a while. CG can't afford to be as hands-off as they were with the fleet meta anymore with just one capital ship in the Executor, especially now that that event has cycled through multiple times now, where a lot of players are catching up with having 7-star Executors. This is a ship I speculated on last time as well. I think it makes even more sense now as we lead up to that next show. Something that I think we see closer to the end of the quarter, if we get to see it. Before getting to the free-to-play gearing on my account, I just want to say a couple quick things on Iden Versio and Scion Boba. With Iden Versio, I threw on the Omicron, so if you are interested in the testing of her, this is where mine stands, and I'll be testing her throughout the Grand Arena season. And I'm looking for, in Territory Wars tomorrow, being able to test out some matches against Mon Mothma if I get lucky enough to come across Mon Mothma on defense. I do want to put a video together if Iden Versio does turn out to be viable surrounded with Gear 11 troopers, and that Omicron makes her viable. I will put something together for that, because what I've been saying about Omicrons, I think I neglected to say this in the last talk video, was the Omicrons I like are the Omicrons that create new teams. This one is in a gray area where it's testing will determine how viable she is without the Omicron, but she definitely seems viable with it. Hopefully at Gear 11 she's viable. It might be something where the gear levels need to be a little closer, so that's something to keep an eye out on. With Boba Fett, because of that map change, I am unfortunately 5 shards short. So there will be no testing of Scion Boba Fett until maybe week 3 or 4 of this Grand Arena, depending if we get Conquest on time. If we get Conquest on time within the first 2 or 3 days, I'll be able to get those 5 shards in Sector 2 and be able to unlock him and start doing my testing and see where he's viable at. The tough part I find with a lot of the footage that gets out is everything's like Relic 8 footage, and for a lot of us that isn't as informative as what I want to put. This new year, one of the things I want to put a bigger emphasis on is putting together videos showing at which gear levels you can start using things. Basically extending this whole lowish viable teams idea, where I'm showing you, okay, a gear 11 trooper squad is good enough. Gear 11 mixed with Relic's Night Sister squad is good enough. That kind of stuff, putting out that information and building out this channel in that capacity. And now, as we always do, the free-to-play gearing of my account. This is from January 10th. We technically could show 2 gearing periods that I did, but I think I'm going to hold off one because I feel like CG is going to release some stuff. We're going to have another talk video this week. So Commander Ahsoka, I'm bringing to Relics. You can use her at gear 11 with some RNG to beat that Phase 1 special mission for light side geos. But she's a character who I've been wanting at Relics. I just wanted to, for a while, test her out at gear 11, gear 12, see how usable she was. Usable enough. Vandor we took to gear 12. He needs to be fast, and he really should be Relics, but I gotta be careful with my Relics. Dark Trooper is another character I want at Relics. And I just taking these characters up in stages. Same thing with Qui-Gon, taking him up in stages. Gear 11 with the Omicron, usable on offense. I didn't test him out on defense, but he will definitely be better at gear 12. He went down fairly easy. Traya, a lot of the gearing I'm doing, the theme that you see here. Same thing with Traya. There's been an RNG component with using a gear 11 Traya. I have lost some battles on occasion, trying to eliminate that RNG. Slowly working on the Jawas. It was Nebit's turn, so took Nebit up to gear 11. At the end of this video, I think Scavenger and Nebit are at gear 11, the rest aren't. I actually have 3 Jawas at gear 11 now. That'll be in the next video. Then Visas. I take Visas up just because I want to do testing with her. She's supposed to be an okay character. It's just she doesn't have enough synergy. I'm completely blind on her as a character. I've heard she has some Lord Vader usage, but these are things that by gearing her up, I'm hoping to give myself enough of a background where I know more. Short Trooper was just a piece away, so I wanted to take him up and work towards finishing up this faction. It's just those 2 stun guns. Magma is the last one remaining. He needs a bunch of stun cuffs, which is why I've been slow on him. And other than that Traya counter, there's not a lot of usage. There used to be some niche usage in like the Sith raid before people knew better stuff. Empire here. I take Relics up to Palpatine. I want a better Palpatine, especially now with Mara Jade. I did some testing with Mara Jade with him, but really I want a better Empire team because of how Mara Jade improves the squad. And I think that's it. That's it for this video. We will be back in 3 months for the next quarterly speculation. This is just going to be an ongoing gimmick. I think these help me ensure that I'm putting out videos on a regular basis. The more of these kinds of ideas that I can develop, the more content that I can be putting out. The same thing with that list video I did last week of checking in on the 6-month basis of looking at the marquees and evaluating how I consider those farms. building out these kinds of ideas in ways that I find interesting, because what I don't want to do is like top 10 galactic legends in the game, or top 10 characters, they're all galactic legends. I don't want to do that kind of stuff. It's not interesting. So anyway, be safe out there, everyone, and be excellent to each other. This is Still Plays Galaxy of Heroes.